Hi, everybody. This is Brian Eisenberg, welcoming you to the next edition of the Always Be Testing webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about landing page optimization, headlines, and calls to action. Before I get started, I just need to go through the unfortunate legalese as we're a public company. For those of you who don't know me, I've been writing a column on ClickSleep for the last 8 years. I've also been the author of several books, a few of them New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestsellers, and we also publish the Grok.com blog. Joining me today for our webinar will be Tom Leung. He is the Senior Business Product Manager for Google Website Optimizer. If there's anything anybody needs to know about Google Website Optimizer, it is Tom who knows it. He's based out of Seattle, and Tom and I have been working together on with Google Optimizer for now almost 2 years. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Look forward to it, Brian.
So I've been working on optimization with clients for a very long time. Actually, not quite as early as Amazon got started, but pretty much close to that. We started working with clients in 1998. But one of the things that always struck me as so interesting, Tom, is that Amazon is whenever you ask anybody, who do they think of when they think of testing online? And the first thing that comes to people's mind is Amazon. This screenshot, for those of you who have never seen it before, is actually Amazon's original homepage. And certainly a lot has changed since then. But, you know, and Amazon's had a few big redesigns over the years, but not a ton. What they've done really good is doing lots of little incremental changes to get some great revenue. And so what I really wanted to do for people is actually walk them through exactly one of those related to their call to action buttons, right? Everybody recognizes the Amazon add to cart button. But it's interesting, they may not have seen it throughout the years. And what they've done is looked at what was happening for the customer during those days and how they matched it and aligned it with their business objectives. And so I just want to run through this real quickly. So if you take a look at this first button, you'll notice, you know, that at the top of it, actually, before the button, it says buy from Amazon.com. Like you didn't know you were on Amazon, right? And then on the button itself, it used to say you can always remove it later, right? Because at that time, this is in the late, mid to late 90s, where people are actually afraid if I hit the button, I'd blow up the universe.
Right.
Right. And so they did a great job there. They also did a great job adding, you know, the lock on there and shopping with us is safe, guaranteed, because everybody was concerned about online shopping at that point.
Yeah, I remember myself finding solace seeing those things, but now if you showed it to me, I would just find it extraneous.
Yeah, it's overkill. So eventually they went ahead, they changed it, but they kept the words, you can always remove it later on the button, but they changed it from buy from Amazon.com to ready to buy, asking a question to kind of provoke people. And again, you know, that worked really well for a very long time. They also added their one click, so certainly that changed significantly. Then over time, they moved you can always remove it later from the button and put it right underneath the ready to buy. And it's interesting because at that same time, this is, I forgot the year exactly, I think 99 or so, I got a whole bunch of calls from clients who said, well, Amazon removed it. Why don't we remove it as well? And I said, well, look, are you in Amazon's business? Do you sell books? And they said, no. And what's interesting is that if you actually look at the screen, one of the things you'll notice about it is right underneath is the add to shopping cart and the buy now with one click. You notice that now they're selling used books, which they weren't doing beforehand. So what they needed to do is make the button smaller and save space so they had more room to keep the used book above the fold. Different business model meant they had to change things around. And even though it actually cost them a little bit in conversion, they were willing to do it because it obviously gave them more revenue based on selling used books. Eventually, they changed that, changed a little bit of look, made it a little bit more 3D-ish, right? A little bit of shadowing to it. It was part of their whole new redesign. At that time, they were promoting their A9 search engine. That didn't really work out too well for them. They had a little bit of competition. And then eventually, one of the most recent ones that they added is this ability to put in a quantity when you're actually putting in an order, which they didn't have until like the beginning of the year. So again, it's the button. I mean, we're not really talking about anything that's significant, but they spent so much time working on it, rethinking, and this is not all the variations, but it just kind of shows you an evolution. And it really is so important that here they take something that's minuscule in terms of an overall business objective, but obviously have paid a lot of attention to it, and a lot of people don't. So today what I want to do is focus in on call to action buttons. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But the other one, which is also one of the most important things that everybody should be testing, is their headlines. And the main reason is that just about 80-85% of people, the first thing they're going to see on your page is your headlines. Doesn't matter what type of personality type you have. These are eye tracking studies that Jacob Nielsen did on the U.S. Census website. And you'll notice everybody's looking at the top of the page. right? So it's a great opportunity. Grab someone strong on a headline and make some same things. I know we're going to go through a couple of case studies that cover this as well. In fact, one of our own case studies, which came out of the Google Website Optimizer beta very early on, a couple of years ago, was Jigsaw Health, and they made 2 or 3 changes on this page. But the key one that made the biggest difference to them was changing the headline from you see the one on the left, 68% of Americans are magnesium deficient. Sorry. That 2/3 of Americans are magnesium deficient. And what's interesting is that normally, right, when you think about marketing best practice, more specific works better than a rounded number. Mm-hmm. Little did we know that when we actually tested it, it nearly doubled conversion.
Right.
Right. And so that's why it's so important to testing. So let's look at just a couple of ways that you can test headlines. So the first one is you can write things out like 9 out of 10 or 90% or 9 out of 10. You have different ways to illustrate the numbers if you have a number in your thing. Because numbers are attention grabbing, like the 7 best ways to or 7 habits of highly effective people. Right? People love this headlines with numbers. So a great way to kind of do things. Another way to do it is asking a question in the headline, kind of like Amazon did right above the buy area where they say, are you ready to buy? Right? So headlines make a big difference. And even how you phrase a question in there can make a big difference for a different personality type, right? Do you want to make a difference is very different than will you make a difference. Mm-hmm. It's different connotations. So you have to test which ones are going to have the most impact. And then lastly I want to cover is the difference between, having headlines that are we-focused versus more customer-focused. I know one of the case studies we're going to cover, we're actually going to show a great example of this. And people can actually find out what I like to call their wee-wee score by going to the URL on our website and actually pulling out a score. And anything like above 65 shows that you're focused more on the customer than you are on your own copy. So those are some quick things about headlines. And obviously in the book, I think there's over 20 different ways we actually show you how you can use headlines and test them and give you different variations. The other one is buttons. And so a lot of people, when they think of buttons, they think of like add to cart buttons. And I'm going to talk about those. But just in general, even if you're on lead gen sites, whatever it is, buttons are buttons are buttons. And there's just general design principles to buttons that you can do that impact conversion. Now, these are for, a whole bunch of different lead sites, and they're all using, submit or please contact me or stuff like, or download a report. And again, you know what? The wording is going to matter, whether you put a little point of action assurance next to it, the shape of it, whether you use an HTML button or if you use a graphical button, right? All these things are going to matter. And let's actually talk about what are the things that matter in a button. This is a collection of add to cart buttons, but this is for all buttons. And the 8 variables that matter when you think about any types of buttons, what the words on the button actually say, right? And we're going to show some good examples of that. The shape of the button. I've normally found that buttons that are irregular actually stand out more on the page than a normal square button. So something to look at. The size of the button compared to how it stands on the page. Because the goal of call to action is to make it jump off the page, right? So it's obvious what to click next. Of course, the style, whether it's flat or 2D or 3D, you kind of saw that in the Amazon example, how they add a little more shadowing to it. Whether it uses an icon or not, right? Here you can see examples of shopping carts or little arrows. I've seen little curved arrows that kind of make you feel like it draws you right into the button. Colors. You want to have a color that has a strong contrast with the page. We're going to show an example of that as well. How easy it is to read what it says on the button, right? How legible it is. And, of course, the location of the button. These are things that people can test every day with buttons. And the reason I decided for this webinar to focus on headlines and buttons because it really makes a great first test for people. And I think it's one of the critical things, and we're going to talk a little bit about why first tests so hard and challenge. But the reason buttons are so powerful and just changing a little bit in call to action, I want to talk about one of our old case studies. And I talked a little bit about this in the book. This was the Dell configurator section. And when you were in there, they used to have the words, as you were trying to select between different options, learn more. And here you are in the buying mode, and you're not in a learning mode. And so they changed the wordings to help me choose. Now, just think about the little subtle thing. And again, it's 2 or 3 words. That accounted for millions of dollars. I can't talk about the exact change in conversion and stuff like that. But something so small can have such a huge impact. And I think that's what people don't realize, that changing the button can have, or changing the words on a button can have that much of an impact, right?
Oh,
Because it's been millions of dollars.
In fact, in the experiments we've seen, the headlines and the buttons easily can move your conversion rates up 10, 20%. And people are often amazed at how small changes like that can have such a big impact.
In fact, I mean, let's go over this great case study from Google, because Google eats its own dog food essentially, using Website Optimizer and making some changes. And I thought it'd be interesting to look at these case studies and look at some of the buttons and the headlines they've done to see the success that they've made with this. So why don't you explain to us what happened in this test?
Sure. So this is an experiment that our AdWords marketing team in the United Kingdom performed. What you see here is the original UK AdWords homepage. As you can imagine, given that most of Google revenue comes through AdWords, this is a very important page for our business. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to test a few sections. We have the header or the headline, the little blurb, the image, and the button. And so it was a pretty simple multivariate test. And what we found...
Actually, it's interesting, Tom. Just looking at the header here, right? It says advertise your business on Google. Obviously, I'm on Google, so that's pretty obvious.
Right.
So this is an example of a wee type headline, right?
Yeah.
That it's talking about your business, not really talking about me as a customer and my needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it'll be interesting when we look at the results to see if the new headline is less of a wee problem. So here's a summary of the results. On the gray column, you can see the original, advertise your business on Google, and the blurb and the button, start now, and then an image of how AdWords works. Then you see the next 4 columns are all of the different variations we tried, and what's highlighted in blue were the winning variations.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, as someone who has a business themselves, of course, I'm naturally attracted to attracting more customers,
yeah.
Right? Because that's all about my needs and what I'm looking for. And same thing if I look at the button, right? Start now versus try AdWords. It's kind of like that Amazon. You can always remove it later. It's just a little less committal. Yes, I'm only asking you to try it. You're not getting started.
Yeah.
And that makes sense why it worked better, and it also lets them know specifically what they're getting started on by reinforcing the AdWords. Because one of the other options was let's get started.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and this is a little bit more of just a nice feel to it than that one. So it's interesting to see that combination won.
You could also argue that the image failed the wee test, where the original was how our AdWords business works, like how the system works,
right,
versus how to create your ad. Right.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where that gray column we had been using, I think, for over a year. And it wasn't until we did this test that we found major improvement. So this is a quick reminder of what the old page looked like. And here's the new page. Attract more customers, try AdWords now, and then how to create your ad as the image. And this had a greater than 20% increase in not just sign-ups, but new active advertisers that are investing in advertising, receiving traffic, and setting up ad campaigns. So
that's pretty significant. Yeah, absolutely. And I also noticed here the button has a different shading on it.
Yep.
So yeah, these are the things that are going to have a big impact.
Yeah. So we were really excited about this one, and the guy that worked on this experiment is a minor rock star in marketing right now.
Hopefully he got a nice raise as well.
Yeah. Maybe he'll send a little bit to the optimizer team.
I should hope so. You guys made him look like a superstar. But it's interesting because testing really, people are kind of hesitant to jump into it. And our good friend, the mutual friend, Sean D'Souza, drew this cartoon for me when I finished writing the Always Be Testing book to kind of illustrate the story that testing is kind of like eating spicy food. At first, you may be very hesitant. You're not really sure, and maybe you even take your first bite, and all of a sudden you feel the heat. But as you keep eating it, you start enjoying it more and more and more and more and more, and it just kind of gets addictive. That you have to keep looking for more. Mm-hmm. And I think testing is kind of that same way. It's like once you overcome that first hurdle of getting that first test done, whether it's success or not, you start getting an appetite for, yes, okay, I got the first test running, and I want to get the next test coming. And I mean, we see this with clients every single day. Once they get that first one done, and once it's already running, they already want to jump to the second one, even though if they're not ready, that they want to jump to the second one. So I think it's really important for people to realize that. But organizations struggle getting that first test. And I know, Google's been testing for a while now, mm-hmm. but it's still a large organization. I know over almost 15,000 people more. I'm sure not everyone adopted it all at once.
No, it was a learning experience for us as well. Now looking back, we're happy to say that Website Optimizer is sort of a standard tool that Google marketers use for their websites, and even we use a lot for our UI and application design. But it wasn't something that happened immediately, and we actually learned a lot from our experience as well as talking to Website Optimizer users and how adoption happened for them. One of the things that you may wonder if you're watching this webinar is, well, why is it so hard to get testing adopted wholeheartedly in an organization, right? Because it's free, it beats guessing hands down, it's a scientific way to do things, it lowers your cost per acquisition. A lot of people are shocked that not everybody is testing right now.
It just seems common sense. And I mean, to illustrate what you said, the Internet Retailer did a study of the top 500 online retailers, and they found that 76% of them are in testing today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is shocking. For those of us wondering about it, probably get it, but why doesn't everybody else get it?
Yeah, I mean, and Avinash always talks about it as a crime against humanity if people aren't testing. I mean, we've been in meetings together with some advertisers that spend a lot of money on advertising, and they still aren't doing any testing, and it's a shame.
It is. Yeah. So what's holding it back?
Well, there's a number of things. They are the hippos, which are the highest paid person in the organization, the guy that has all the power, maybe it's the VP of marketing or design, and they just don't feel like their opinion is wrong, and everybody kind of just genuflects to them and does what they say. The second one is the IT department is focused on some new initiative, rolling out some new platform, and they just don't think it's important enough for them to add a few simple tags to the page to help you test. The third one is that everybody wants to do testing, but they like it so much that they try and think of the most creative and sophisticated and complex tests that they can, and then it ends up being endless meetings and disagreements on what to test. And then the last thing is that some people expect 300% improvement in conversion rate on your first test, and if they don't get that, they feel like, oh, well, I guess I'm just not cut out for testing, when in reality, that first test is really, where you learn a lot, but you really got to go to your third to really get into the groove.
Yeah, it's funny, because we just finished, working on an engagement with the current client with Google Website Optimizer, and we planned out, we did a whole analysis of all the different things that we expect them to test. And the first test was they have a particular type of page on their website that they do recipes, and they're involved in the food category. And that page was where they had the biggest abandonment. They had a lot of issues on it, and so we made a whole bunch of recommendations. So it's going to take a while for them to implement, to get the testing ready to go. But we wanted to make sure that their designers and their programmers were ready to run a test. They knew how to do it, were comfortable with it. So we suggested, hey, you know what? Let's just test your add to cart button. It's not a big deal. And so the designer created 8 different variations for it, just different colors, different sizes, a little different wording, stuff like that. And we made it very clear. The goal of the first test was not to have a success in terms of, if it gets a conversion boost, that's great. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't, there's nothing really wrong with the button. It actually works well with design. Mm-hmm. But we'd like to see them execute one and get some results. Yeah. And as soon as they got that launched, they were like, yes, we got to get the other ones ready. We got to. And so, yeah, it's getting that first one done. Everyone's seeing the results coming in. That matters. So it's like batting practice, or shooting foul shots. Mm-hmm. You don't have to get the first one in every single time, but as long as you keep practicing, you're going to get some great results.
Absolutely. And you can imagine, had they attempted to do a multi-page, a multivariate, multi-goal, layout plus text and image, they might still be talking about it.
Yeah, they'd be completely frustrated. This was an easy test. They changed to one image, right, for a few different variations, and it didn't take a lot of resources, but they now feel comfortable. They know how to do the next test.
Yep, right on. So let's talk about what to do when you're dealing with your hippo. Oftentimes you're going to hear, well, I've been in marketing for 20 years. I don't need to do any tests. This is maybe your boss or your boss's boss. Or, well, this isn't the way that we've been doing design forever. And even at Google, there were some designers that were sort of more skeptical than others about the power of testing. And I think when you think about their point of view, they're hired to be experts in design and aesthetics and usability, and unless it's positioned well, the technology can be looked at as a threat. So one of the things that we did with our very high influential folks was we actually started more of a grassroots movement for testing, and we didn't start at the very top. And
that was a good move.
yes, and that's how we got a lot done early on. Back I guess a little over 2 years ago. Another thing that we did was we focused our tests on things that were fairly controversial that people have been arguing about for a long period of time, whether the button should be blue or green or whatever, that kind of thing. And we just said, okay, well, we're going to assign a small percentage of traffic to a test, and then we're going to just present this as a data point. And people would look at that and say, wow, that helped shortcut these conversations and these debates very quickly. The other thing that you can do is really, try and be a lightning rod and go after those big, big redesign debates or big sort of page design questions that have been, constantly putting factions against each other, and try and settle it with a test. So that's the main thing I would say with dealing with the Hippo is you don't have to go to the CEO to say, hey, let's do a 3-year initiative about how our company is going to be a testing-driven company.
Just keep it simple and small and something like that.
Yeah.
The other thing, it's also an issue with designers is oftentimes from their perspective, they're actually doing 100% the right thing in their design. It's, aesthetically from a design principle point of view, their design's probably better than the test.
Yeah.
However, I like to think about the golden rule. You know what the golden rule is? He who has the gold rules. And so at the end of the day, if the customer decides on something that actually works better, but it breaks the aesthetic, I think you have to find a balance at that point. And so, and I think that's something that you can have, because it's their baby, it's their design. So you've got to manage those expectations significantly.
Yeah. The other thing I would add for Hippos is that presenting a Hippo with a finished experiment report and then the before and after shot is much more successful than saying, hey, may I set up a test and try these things? Because I think Hippos, ultimately, they're very powerful because they're results-oriented. And even the person with the most pride, if they see that a new design is 30% better than the old one, they're happy to go with it.
And to take credit for the success.
Oh, yeah. They'll suddenly be the biggest advocate. The other obstacle you may encounter is the IT guy, right? And so oftentimes you'll get the marketing buy-in and you're ready to go, and the IT guys will say, well, I don't want to add these tags because I'm working on some other thing. I have this other initiative where we're doing some new infrastructure project. Some of the tips I would offer is, one, don't go to your IT department and say, I need you to add these tags to this page, but say, this is why I'm asking you. I'm trying to implement a new technology to help us make better pages. This is how it works. It works using statistics and science, which often appeals to folks on the IT side, right? Start really simple. Don't try a multivariate, multi-goal test. Just do an A/B, right? And with a simple goal. And then prepare for the objections, and you can get more information from books like Always Be Testing about these kinds of things. But just know that they're going to ask, how does it work? Where do I put the JavaScript? What happens if the service is down? And we have very good answers to all those questions. In fact, we probably should do a blog about that down the road. And then show how it can save the IT people some time, because you can say, you know what, instead of me asking you to do all these changes and not know if they're going to be beneficial or not, now you'll know that any change I ask you to make permanently to the source code of the page is going to be tested and proven. Furthermore, you can even use Website Optimizer to continue to do tests without adding new tags using our copy feature, where once the tags are on there, you can run multiple experiments over and over.
Exactly.
So this is a good problem to have. This is where everybody loves testing, and they all are totally bought into it, and they see the benefits, but they get a little ahead of themselves. And they try to design as complicated a test as they can, and they say, well, let's do like a 5-page test where we do 3 different funnels and 4 different goals and that kind of thing, which is certainly great if your organization's already primed and has been doing testing. But if it's your first test, the good old A/B with some headline and button is going to get you major wins right on. And furthermore, don't think about testing as like one thing something you do once a year, but it's just like spell check or print preview. You should be doing it for all your pages, and there's enough content for everybody that likes testing to do their own tests.
Well, I kind of like, liken it to, trying to keep healthy, right?
Yeah.
You don't exercise once a year and say, oh, I'm fit,
Yeah.
right? The website constantly needs exercise in the form of tests to keep getting better and better and keep in shape, essentially.
Yeah, totally. So keep it simple. And then the last thing is the learning curve. Remember that that first test, it may not be a home run, but you're going to learn a lot about how the tool works, how the technology works, what content was more effective than other content. And just know that for almost every user out there, their first test, they may have a slight improvement. It's usually the second and the third where they really start knocking out of the park. So that would be my advice is think about that first test the same way, Brian, that you were talking about, that little button test for the food company. Don't look at it as the be-all, end-all, and sort of hang your whole career on it. Just say, we're going to run this test. It's a small proof of concept, and then the real test will be our second test.
Perfect.
So some of the things that we did at Google that we found were successful were we didn't necessarily start from the top down. It was definitely a bottoms-up effort. We also started pitching to the people whose jobs depended on conversion rates, right? So we actually didn't really pitch the designers nearly as hard as the product marketing manager.
Right, the guy who has to get more AdWords signups every quarter.
Yeah. The guy who's signed up for hitting a certain number, and he's going to do everything he can to boost that number. And when you tell them, well, you know what, here's a way to get it up 30%, how would you like that? Then
they're bought in.
They bought in. And we also celebrated a lot of early victories. Like once we had the first Gmail experiment, we did a presentation to all of the marketers at Google and said, hey, look at how we did these tests, and these are the improvements we got. And that was a big win. Instead of saying, here's the new technology, everybody use it,
yeah.
We're saying, here's an example of it working. And now actually we're developing a formal archive where on our intranet, all marketers can look at previous experiments. They can search for them by keywords. They can see the reports and the screenshots. And then we will award the most innovative and most successful tester, every quarter with a certificate and recognition.
Very cool. So we have one last case study here, which is the Picasso case study. This is one of my favorites, actually.
Yes. So this is one of our, I think it might have been the first or second internal test we ran. So this is an image of the original Picasso sign-up page. As you can see, it follows a lot of best practices as a picture of the image, as the word free for the call to action, as a very action-oriented headline. It's a page that people were pretty happy with.
And notice that this call to action is done in a link, right, as part of the original.
Exactly. And there was a time where a lot of people were saying links were better than buttons. This is the newer version, which we tested, and you can see we changed the link. We had a button that had free.
Right.
But that actually didn't do as well as try, which is actually similar with the AdWords UK test. We removed the picture. It turns out that picture didn't encourage people to sign up as much. Maybe it wasn't the best picture.
Actually, it's really important that sometimes it's equally as important to remove things as it is to add things into a test.
Totally, yeah.
And then you added a thing to kind of make it easy. It's an easy way to share and manage your photos.
Exactly. Versus find, organize, and share, right?
Yep.
And so this increased the downloads by 30%. So that product marketing manager was also very happy. You've probably experienced this one if you use Gmail. We are constantly testing things on the Gmail sign-up page, within the sign-up flow, even in the application. And this is an example here where we were moving things around. We were changing the order, title of bullets. And this one increased, it had close to a 10% increase in the sign-up rate.
Which is great.
So we're pretty pleased with that.
So simple things can have a huge, huge impact.
Yeah, and the other thing is this box order, whether the box is on top or the bottom, huge source of just passionate debate. Turns out it didn't make a big difference whether you put it on top.
And so the argument got stopped.
Then they're no longer arguing about that. They're probably arguing about something else. So the last thing I would say is here are just, there's a bunch of online testing resources that we provide, including links to partners like Future Now, our blog. We've got new videos, case studies, all that kind of good stuff. It's all available for you at google.com/website optimizer.
And of course, let's not forget, part of the series is called Always Be Testing, because the book finally came out. Always Be Testing, Complete Guide to Google Website Optimizer, and the book offers over 250 testing ideas to get people started in case the webinar didn't give them enough. And they can pick that up anywhere.
I have to say, that book, and I know I'm biased, but I've been really, really impressed with it, and specifically, it's the kind of book where you can just open it up and instantly have a test ready to go this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Of course, people can find out more about Future Now and ourselves and all the different books that I've written. And, of course, they can find more about Google Website Optimizer at
google.com/website optimizer.
Thank you, Tom, for spending time with us today. I hope everybody enjoyed the webinar, and we look forward to sharing with you the next